Subscribe to Cheating Tales Lab. Now let's begin. The December rain hammered against the windshield as Robert Archer pulled into the Mercy General parking lot. He'd driven 3 hours straight from his office in Portland, his assistant's frantic call still echoing in his mind. "Your son is here. You need to come now." Robert had built Archer Freight Solutions from a single truck to a logistics empire spanning the West Coast. He'd moved everything from medical supplies to classified government cargo, built relationships with people who owed him favors, and learned that information was the most valuable commodity of all. But none of that mattered when he saw the battered white van in the corner of the lot, condensation fogging its windows. He'd been estranged from Marcos for 2 years. Not by choice. Robert had fought to maintain contact after his son married Stephanie Compton. The Comptons were old Portland money, the kind of family who smiled at charity galas while crushing anyone they deemed beneath them. They'd never approved of Marcos, a talented muralist who chose art over their preferred son-in-law, some Ivy League lawyer or hedge fund manager. When Marcos stood his ground, choosing love over their ultimatums, the Comptons had smiled and waited. Robert knocked on the van's rear door. Silence. Then a child's wet cough, the sound rattling in small lungs. "Marcos. It's Dad." The door cracked open. His son looked like he'd aged a decade. Marcos had always been lean, but now he was gaunt, his artistic hands trembling as they gripped the door. Behind him, on a makeshift bed of blankets and pillows, lay 6-year-old Sophie, Robert's granddaughter. Her face was pale, lips cracked with fever. "Why aren't you in the apartment I'm paying for?" Robert kept his voice level, though rage simmered beneath. Marcos couldn't meet his eyes. "They? Stephanie's family. They had me evicted last week. Said I violated the lease, some clause Stephanie signed when we moved in. I didn't even know about it. They emptied our joint account that same day. $23,000. Gone." His voice broke. "Sophie needs medicine I can't afford. The doctors say it's pneumonia. They gave me samples, but they're running out." Robert looked at his granddaughter, remembering the bright little girl who'd once painted sunflowers on his office wall. The girl who called him Gramps and made him laugh for the first time since his wife died. Now she lay there, struggling to breathe in the back of a van. He looked back at Marcos. "Get your things. Both of you." "Dad, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm telling you. Pack. Now." "Why? What are you going to do?" Robert's expression hardened, the same look he wore when negotiating with people who thought they could intimidate him. "Because by tomorrow, they'll be the ones who can't afford anything." 2 hours later, Sophie was in a private room at Mercy General, the best pediatric pulmonologist in the city examining her. Robert had made 2 calls, one to the hospital administrator, another to a specialist he'd once helped relocate their elderly mother across the country on short notice. Favors, Robert had learned, were currency. Marcos sat in the hallway, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup he hadn't touched. Robert studied his son, the boy he'd raised after his wife's death from cancer when Marcos was 12. They'd been close once, before Stephanie and her family drove a wedge between them. "Tell me everything," Robert said, sitting beside him. Marcos exhaled slowly. "I met Stephanie 4 years ago at an art gallery opening. She was different then, or maybe I was just too in love to see what was underneath. Her family hated me from the start. At our wedding, her father Chad didn't even shake my hand. Her mother Donna spent the reception telling anyone who'd listened that Stephanie was throwing her life away. But you tried to make it work." "I did. God, Dad, I really did. I took on commercial projects, steady work instead of the murals I wanted to paint. We moved into that apartment, the one in her family's building. I should have known it was a trap. Stephanie handled all the finances. She said it was easier that way, that I could focus on my art. I was so stupid." Robert shook his head. "You trusted your wife. That's not stupid. 3 months ago, things changed. Stephanie started staying late at her family's company, Compton Holdings. They own half the commercial real estate in downtown Portland. Her brother Nate works there too. She'd come home and criticize everything. My work, how I dressed, how I talked. Then she started turning Sophie against me, telling her that Daddy didn't make enough money, that we'd be better off without me. And you didn't tell me." Marcos's eyes filled with tears. "She said if I went to you, she'd file for divorce and make sure I never saw Sophie again. Her family has lawyers, connections. I believed her. 2 weeks ago, I came home and she was gone. Took most of Sophie's things, her clothes, everything. left a note saying she was staying with her parents, that I could have supervised visitation if I signed over custody. You didn't sign. Of course not. She's my daughter. So last week, 2 sheriff's deputies showed up with an eviction notice. Stephanie had signed the lease as the primary tenant. I was just an occupant. When I went to the bank, our account was empty. She'd transferred everything to an account in her name only. Her lawyer served me papers the same day. Divorce, full custody, claiming I was an unfit parent because I couldn't provide stable housing. Robert's jaw tightened. Where's Sophie been through all this? Stephanie dropped her off 3 days ago. Said she had business to attend to, and I needed to step up. Sophie was already sick. I took her to the ER, but without insurance, Stephanie canceled our policy. They stabilized her and sent us away with samples. I've been staying in the van, parked here so I could bring her back if she got worse. Marcos's voice shook. I failed her, Dad. I failed my little girl. Robert gripped his son's shoulder. No, you fought for her. That's all that matters. Now let me fight for both of you. The next morning, Robert made calls from his downtown office while Marcos stayed with Sophie. His assistant, Elsa Gardner, had worked with him for 15 years. She understood that when Robert used his particular tone of voice, questions weren't welcome. I need everything on Compton Holdings and the Compton family. Chad, Donna, Nate, and Stephanie. Business dealings, property records, lawsuits, anything buried in public records. And Elsa? I need it by this afternoon. Consider it done. His second call went to Louis Lehman, a private investigator whose sister Robert had once helped when she needed to disappear from an abusive ex-husband. Louis's specialty was finding things people didn't want found. Robert, it's been a while. I need surveillance on a family. The Comptons. I want to know everywhere they go, everyone they meet, every transaction they make. Can you start today? For you? Already on it. What am I looking for specifically? Anything that doesn't add up. These people are old money, but old money always has secrets. Find them. The third call was more delicate. Johnny Watson answered on the first ring. Archer, didn't expect to hear from you. Johnny was a lawyer, not the corporate type who worked in glass towers, but the kind who fought in courtrooms against people who thought their money made them untouchable. He'd successfully sued a manufacturing company that had tried to stiff Robert on a contract years ago. Since then, they'd maintained a mutual respect. I need representation for my son. Custody case. The opposing party is the Compton family. Johnny whistled. Compton Holdings? You're not playing small ball. My granddaughter is sick because they threw my son out on the street and stole his money. I don't care how big they are. I'm in. Send me everything you have. By 3 p.m., Elsa had compiled a dossier that Robert studied with cold focus. Compton Holdings owned 43 commercial properties in Portland, with recent expansions into residential developments. Chad Compton served on various nonprofit boards, always photographed at charity events with that practiced smile. Donna chaired a women's foundation. Nate had graduated from Stanford Business School and worked as VP of Development. Stephanie held a nominal position in their property management division. On paper, they were pillars of the community. But Robert had built his career on understanding what moved beneath surfaces. There's something else, Elsa said, sliding another file across his desk. 3 properties Compton Holdings acquired in the past year. The purchase prices seem low, significantly below market value. And all 3 sellers were elderly, single owners. Robert scanned the documents. Possible elder exploitation? Can't prove it yet. But it's worth investigating. His phone rang. Louis. Already got something. Stephanie Compton met with her father and brother this morning at their office. I've got a contact in their building. According to them, Stephanie was celebrating. Said she'd taken care of the Marcos problem, and that once the custody hearing was done, she'd get a nice settlement and could move on to someone better. Robert's expression didn't change, but his grip on the phone tightened. What about the account she drained? Transferred the money to an offshore account yesterday. 23 grand. My guy says the Comptons have done this before, small amounts that wouldn't raise red flags. They're careful. Not careful enough. Keep watching them. Robert sat back in his chair, processing. The Comptons thought they were dealing with an artist who couldn't fight back. They'd orchestrated this perfectly. Eviction, theft, custody claims. All designed to crush Marcos while maintaining their pristine reputation. They'd made one critical mistake. They'd hurt his family. Robert opened his laptop and began typing, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency. He'd spent 30 years building a network of drivers, warehouse managers, dock supervisors, customs officials, people who moved goods and information across the country, people who owed him favors, people who understood that Robert Archer always paid his debts and always collected on theirs. It was time the Comptons learned that some people couldn't be bullied. It was time they learned what happened when you backed a predator into a corner. The hospital room was quiet except for Sophie's steady breathing. The antibiotics were working. Color had returned to her cheeks. Marcos sat beside her bed, holding her hand. Robert entered with coffee and a folder. "She's getting better," Marcos said, relief evident in his voice. "She is. The doctor says she'll be released in 2 days." Robert handed him the coffee. "We need to talk about what comes next. The custody hearing is in 3 weeks. Stephanie's lawyer sent over her demands. She wants full custody, child support, and she's claiming I'm psychologically unstable because I was homeless. She won't get any of that." Marcos looked up. "Dad, they have money, lawyers. So do we. Johnny Watson is representing you. He's the best. But more importantly, the Comptons made tactical errors. They moved too fast, got too confident." Robert opened the folder. The eviction was based on a lease clause that may not be legally enforceable. The joint account they drained, that's financial abuse. Stephanie abandoning Sophie with you while she was sick, then claiming you're unfit? That's ammunition for us. But will it be enough? It's a start. The Comptons think they're fighting an artist with no resources. They don't know about me yet, and they won't until it's too late. Robert leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to move into my house with Sophie. You'll get documentation of every conversation, every interaction with Stephanie. Johnny will file for emergency custody based on Stephanie's abandonment and your current stable housing situation." "What are you going to do?" Robert smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm going to make sure that when this is over, the Comptons regret the day they decided to destroy my family." "Dad, don't do anything illegal. I won't have to. People like the Comptons always have skeletons. I'm just going to open the closet door and let them fall out." He stood. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, you and Sophie come home with me. And Marcos? This ends with her in your arms, safe and healthy. I promise you that." After Robert left, Marcos looked at his sleeping daughter. For the first time in months, he felt something he'd almost forgotten: hope. In his office that evening, Robert made one more call. This one to Art Schaefer, a forensic accountant who'd helped him untangle a competitor's fraudulent billing scheme years ago. "Art, I need you to audit a company for me. Compton Holdings. I'm looking for anything irregular, tax irregularities, questionable transactions, anything that doesn't smell right. Can you do it quietly? Quietly is my specialty. Give me a week." Robert hung up and stared out at the Portland skyline. Somewhere in that glittering expanse, the Comptons were celebrating their victory over Marcos, confident in their power and untouchability. They had no idea the war had just begun, and Robert Archer had never lost a war. The Compton family estate sat in Portland's West Hills, a sprawling property with manicured gardens and views of the city. Inside, Stephanie Compton sat in her childhood bedroom, scrolling through her phone with satisfaction. The divorce papers were filed. The custody hearing was scheduled. Her lawyer assured her it would be a formality. Her mother Donna knocked and entered, carrying a glass of wine. "Feeling better, darling?" "Much. I can't believe I wasted 4 years with him. God, Mother, what was I thinking? You were young. These things happen. The important thing is you're free now, and Sophie will grow up properly." Donna sat on the bed. "Your father and Nate have been discussing your future. There's that lawyer, the Henriksen boy. Quite successful, from a good family. We thought perhaps dinner next week." Stephanie smiled. "That sounds perfect." Downstairs, Chad and Nate Compton reviewed documents in the study. Chad poured bourbon, his expression satisfied. "The apartment's already relisted at a higher rate. We'll have new tenants by month's end." Nate nodded. "And Marcos is out of the picture. He doesn't have the resources to fight us. His father might be wealthy, but Robert Archer's in freight, not law. He can't touch us. Still, keep an eye on the situation. I don't like loose ends." "Understood. But honestly, Dad, this was almost too easy. Marcos never saw it coming." Chad raised his glass. "To family, and to knowing when to cut dead weight." They drank, unaware that across town, Robert Archer was systematically dismantling the foundation of everything they'd built. The next morning, Robert picked up Marcos and Sophie from the hospital. His house in the West Hills, deliberately chosen in the same exclusive neighborhood as the Comptons, had been prepared for their arrival. Sophie's room was painted her favorite color, yellow, with new furniture and toys. Marcos's room had a studio space set up for his art. "Dad, this is too much," Marcos said, watching Sophie explore her new room with delighted wonder. "It's home. You both belong here." Robert crouched down to Sophie's level. "Hey, sunshine. You like your room?" "Gramps, there's a princess castle." Her voice was still raspy but excited. "That's right. And you're going to stay here and get strong, okay? Can Daddy stay too?" "Daddy's staying as long as he wants. This is your home now." Later, after Sophie was asleep, Robert and Marcos sat in the study. Johnny Watson had sent over the initial filings. Emergency custody based on abandonment and current unstable living conditions on Stephanie's part. "The hearing is in 10 days, Johnny explained via video call. "We're arguing that Stephanie demonstrated unfitness by dumping a sick child with her father in an emergency situation. The financial abuse, draining the account, canceling insurance, also works in our favor. The eviction is murkier, but we're challenging it." "What are our chances?" Marcos asked. "Better than they were yesterday. Robert's house provides stability. The medical records showing Sophie's condition when she was abandoned help. But the Comptons have influence. This won't be easy." After the call, Marcos turned to his father. "Thank you for all of this. You're my son. Sophie's my granddaughter. There's nothing to thank me for." Robert paused. "But there's something you should know. I'm not just fighting this custody battle. I'm going after the Comptons themselves." "What do you mean?" "They thought they could destroy you without consequences. I'm going to show them they were wrong. Everything they've built, everything they value, I'm going to take it apart piece by piece. And when I'm done, they'll wish they'd never heard the name Archer." Marcos saw the steel in his father's eyes, the same determination that had built a logistics empire from nothing. How? By using the same thing that made them think they were untouchable, their arrogance. People who believe they're above consequences get sloppy. They leave trails. And I'm very good at following trails. Robert stood. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, we start fighting back." That night, Elsa sent Robert an encrypted email. Lewis's investigation had uncovered something interesting. Nate Compton had been making regular visits to a commercial property Compton Holdings didn't own. The property was listed under a shell company, but the timing of the visits, always late at night, raised questions. Robert forwarded the information to Art Schaefer with a simple note: "Dig deeper." The Comptons had no idea the walls were already closing in, and Robert Archer was just getting started. 3 days later, Art Schaefer called with news. "Robert, you were right to be suspicious. Compton Holdings has a pattern of acquiring properties below market value from elderly sellers. I found 7 in the past 3 years. In each case, the seller was single, over 70, and died within 6 months of the sale." Robert's blood went cold. Natural causes? On paper, yes. But the pattern is concerning. All 7 signed over power of attorney to a care manager shortly before the sales. That care manager works for a company owned by Donna Compton. Elder abuse. Almost certainly, but proving it requires more than patterns. We'd need testimony from families, medical records, evidence of coercion. These cases are hard to prosecute. What about the shell company Nate's been visiting? Still digging, but I found something else. Compton Holdings is leveraged heavily, much more than their public filings suggest. They've been taking high-interest loans from private lenders to fund their expansion. If their cash flow got disrupted, they'd be in serious trouble. Robert absorbed this. The Comptons weren't as financially secure as they appeared, and if they were involved in elder abuse, that was both morally reprehensible and legally actionable. "Keep digging. I want everything." His next call was to Lewis. "The property Nate's been visiting. Can you get inside?" "Already ahead of you. It's a warehouse in the industrial district. No cameras inside, but I've got exterior surveillance. Whatever he's doing there, he doesn't want it documented. Drugs? Stolen goods? Can't tell without getting inside. But I've got a guy who might be willing to take a look. Former warehouse worker, knows the layout. For the right price, he can get us photos. Do it, but tell him to be careful. If this goes sideways, I don't want anyone getting hurt." Understood. Robert hung up and reviewed his strategy. The custody hearing was in 6 days. Johnny was building a strong case, but the Comptons had influence with local judges. Robert needed leverage, something so damaging that they'd back off rather than risk exposure. The elder abuse pattern was promising, but proving it would take time. The warehouse could be the key. If Nate was involved in something illegal, that would shake the family's reputation and potentially draw a criminal investigation. But Robert needed more. He needed something immediate and irrefutable. His phone buzzed. A text from Johnny, Stephanie's lawyer requesting meeting. Says she wants to discuss terms before hearing. Robert smiled grimly. They were getting nervous. The meeting took place in a neutral conference room downtown. Stephanie sat with her lawyer, a polished woman named Michelle Schroeder who specialized in high-net-worth divorces. Marcos sat with Johnny and Robert, who'd insisted on attending despite Michelle's objections. Mr. Archer isn't a party to these proceedings, Michelle said coolly. Mr. Archer is providing housing and support for his son and granddaughter, Johnny replied. He has every right to be here. Stephanie looked uncomfortable, her eyes flicking between her lawyer and Robert. She'd expected a broken Marcos, alone and desperate. Instead, she faced a united front. Let's get to the point, Michelle said. My client is willing to reduce her custody demands to joint custody, with primary residence going to her. In exchange, Mr. Archer withdraws all claims of financial abuse and abandonment. Johnny didn't even glance at his notes. Your client abandoned a sick child with her father, drained their joint account, and canceled their health insurance. She has no leverage here. We're seeking full custody with supervised visitation for Mrs. Archer. Michelle's expression hardened. The Compton family has significant resources. Dragging this into a prolonged court battle won't benefit anyone, especially the child. Is that a threat? Robert asked quietly. It's a reality. The Comptons can outlast any opponent financially. It would be prudent to settle now on reasonable terms. Robert leaned forward, his voice calm but edged with steel. Let me explain something to you and your client. I built my company from nothing. I've negotiated with union bosses, government bureaucrats, and corporate raiders. The Comptons don't intimidate me. So here's my reality. We're taking this to court. And when we win, Mrs. Archer will be lucky to get supervised visitation once a month. Stephanie spoke for the first time, her voice shaking slightly. You can't win. My family. Your family is going to have bigger problems soon, Robert interrupted. Much bigger problems than this custody case. Michelle stood abruptly. I think we're done here. We'll see you in court. After they left, Marcos exhaled. That was intense. They're scared, Johnny observed. Offering joint custody this early means they're worried about the abandonment angle. We've got them on the defensive. Robert said nothing, his mind already moving to the next phase. Stephanie's nervousness had been telling. The Comptons were used to crushing opposition through intimidation and resources, but they weren't used to opponents who fought back systematically. That evening, Lewis called with an update. My guy got into the warehouse. Robert, you're not going to believe this. It's full of construction materials, copper wire, expensive fixtures, high-end appliances. All still in manufacturer packaging. Stolen. Looks that way. But here's the interesting part. The invoices my guy photographed match several Compton Holdings construction projects. They're buying materials at full price for their developments, then storing identical materials in this warehouse. Robert understood immediately. Insurance fraud. They're claiming theft on their construction sites, getting insurance payouts, then reselling these stolen materials. Exactly. It's actually brilliant if you ignore the whole massive fraud aspect. They've probably pulled this on a dozen projects. Can you get more documentation? Already working on it. But Robert, if they catch wind of this investigation, they'll clean out that warehouse overnight. Then we move fast. I want every piece of evidence documented within 48 hours. Photos, invoices, everything. You got it. Robert sat back, the pieces falling into place. Elder abuse, insurance fraud, and a pattern of financial manipulation. The Comptons had built their empire on exploitation and fraud, protected by their reputation and social standing. But reputations could be destroyed, and Robert had all the tools he needed to do exactly that. The custody hearing was in 5 days. But Robert wasn't planning to wait that long. It was time to start the demolition. The next morning, Robert made a call to an old friend at the Portland Tribune, Martha Snyder. She'd been an investigative reporter for 20 years, with a reputation for breaking stories others wouldn't touch. Martha, I have something that might interest you. Robert Archer calling with a story tip? This must be good. It's about Compton Holdings and a pattern of elder abuse in their property acquisitions. I'm sending you documents, 7 cases where elderly homeowners sold properties below market value, then died shortly after. All signed over power of attorney to a care manager employed by Donna Compton's company. There was a pause. The Comptons? Robert, they're one of the most respected families in Portland. And they have very good lawyers. I know. That's why I'm giving you the documentation to verify independently. If the story holds up, it's yours. But Martha, there's a time element. I need this published before the end of the week. That's a tight turnaround for this level of investigation. I understand. But there's a little girl involved, my granddaughter, and the Comptons are trying to take her away from her father. I need the truth about this family out there before the custody hearing. Martha was quiet for a moment. Send me everything. I'll see what I can verify. But Robert, if this doesn't hold up, it will. I guarantee it. He sent the files and then called Art Schaefer. I need you to talk to Martha Snyder at the Tribune. She's investigating the elder abuse angle. Give her access to your analysis. Happy to help. But Robert, even if the story runs, the Comptons can claim it's a vendetta related to your custody case. Let them. Once the story's out, other families will come forward. People who were too afraid to speak up before will see they're not alone. The Comptons won't be able to bury this. Next, he contacted Johnny Watson. We need to amend our custody filing. I want to include evidence of the Compton family's business practices, specifically their involvement in elder abuse and fraud. It goes to character and judgment. That's aggressive. The judge might view it as a smear tactic, or the judge might view it as relevant context for why Stephanie learned to manipulate and exploit others. She drained my son's account and abandoned her sick child. That's the same pattern of exploitation her parents use in business. Johnny considered this. I can make that argument. But we need to be careful. If we overreach, it could backfire. We won't overreach. We'll just present the facts and let the judge draw conclusions. The pieces were moving. The investigation into the warehouse was ongoing. The newspaper story was in development. The custody case was strengthening. But Robert knew the Comptons wouldn't sit idle. He was right. That afternoon, Marcos received a call from Stephanie. Don't hang up, she said quickly. I need to talk to you. In person. I don't think that's a good idea. Please, Marcos. It's about Sophie. Meet me at the coffee shop on 3rd Street. 1 hour. Just you. Marcos looked at his father, who'd overheard on speaker. It's a trap, Robert said flatly. Maybe. But what if it's not? What if she actually wants to work something out? Robert studied his son's face. The hope there, the desperate desire to believe the woman he'd loved might still have some decency. If you go, I'm coming with you. And Louis will be there too, watching. An hour later, Marcos sat in the coffee shop while Robert and Louis watched from a vehicle across the street. Stephanie arrived with Nate, which immediately confirmed Robert's suspicions. Through Louis's long-range microphone, they heard the conversation clearly. I wanted to talk about Sophie, Stephanie began, her voice soft and reasonable. This fighting isn't good for her. Then drop the custody case. Let me keep her. Nate leaned forward. That's not realistic, Marcos. You're unemployed. You were living in a van. No judge is going to give you custody. I have a home now. Stability. And I'm her father. A home your father provided, Stephanie said. But how long will that last? Robert's not getting any younger. What happens when he can't support you anymore? Marcos's jaw tightened. What do you want, Stephanie? I want us to settle this reasonably. I'll agree to joint custody if you sign over your parental rights regarding major decisions, education, medical care, residence. And you agree not to make any public statements about our family. In the vehicle, Robert's expression darkened. They're trying to gag him. They know something's coming. Louis nodded. They're worried about the investigation. Someone tipped them off. Back in the coffee shop, Marcos stood. I'm not signing over my rights. Sophie is my daughter. If you want custody, fight for it in court. Nate's pleasant facade dropped. You're making a mistake. My family has connections you can't imagine. Judges, lawyers, city officials. We'll bury you. Try it. As Marcos left, Stephanie called after him. You're going to lose her, Marcos. And it'll be your fault. Robert watched his son walk out with his head high, proud of him. Then he turned to Louis. They're panicking. Double the surveillance. I want to know every move they make. That evening, Martha Snyder called. "Robert, I've verified 4 of the 7 cases. Families of the deceased sellers are willing to talk. Some were suspicious but didn't know what to do. One daughter tried to file a complaint with Adult Protective Services but was told there wasn't enough evidence. When can you publish? I need 2 more days to lock down the remaining cases and get legal review. This is going to explode, Robert. The Comptons will come after me and the paper. Can you handle it?" "With what I've got? Absolutely. This is the kind of story that ends careers, or makes them. Then run with it." "And Martha? Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Let's see if I still have a job next week." 2 days later, the Tribune ran the story on the front page. Prominent Portland family linked to elder abuse in property deals. The article detailed the pattern of questionable sales, the connection to Donna Compton's care management company, and included heartbreaking interviews with families who felt their elderly relatives had been manipulated. The response was immediate and explosive. The Compton family went into crisis mode. Chad held an emergency meeting with their lawyers and PR team. The conference room at Compton Holdings buzzed with tension. "This is a hit piece orchestrated by Robert Archer," Chad insisted. "It's retaliation for the custody case." Their lead attorney, a sharp-eyed man named Ed Baker, shook his head. "The timing is suspicious, but the documentation is solid." The Tribune verified its sources. "We can't dismiss this as fabrication." Donna looked pale, her usual composure shaken. "I've done nothing wrong. The care management company provides legitimate services. If some families feel their relatives were coerced, that's unfortunate, but it's not criminal." "It will be if the DA decides to investigate," Ed replied. "And with this kind of publicity, they'll have to at least look into it." Nate slammed his hand on the table. "This is exactly what Archer wanted. Destroy our reputation so we look bad in the custody hearing." "It's working," Stephanie said quietly. "I've had 3 friends text me this morning asking if the story is true. People are talking." Chad stood, his face flushed with anger. "We hit back. Hard. File a defamation suit against the Tribune and Robert Archer. Drag him into court. Make him regret ever crossing us." Ed held up a hand. "That's a terrible idea. It would look like we're trying to silence legitimate journalism. And if we sue Archer, his lawyers will get discovery access to all your business records. Do you really want that?" The room fell silent. "What do we do?" Donna asked finally. "We contain the damage. Issue a statement denying any wrongdoing. Emphasize your charitable work, and hope this blows over before the custody hearing." But it didn't blow over. By that afternoon, 3 more families had come forward with similar stories. The district attorney's office announced a preliminary review, and Adult Protective Services opened an investigation into Donna's care management company. At Robert's house, Marcos watched the news coverage with a mixture of shock and guilt. "Dad, I didn't want you to destroy them. I just wanted Sophie back." Robert turned off the television. "I didn't destroy them. They destroyed themselves through years of exploitation. I just made sure people knew the truth." He placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "The Comptons have hurt a lot of people, not just you and Sophie. They deserve to face consequences. But what if this makes the custody case harder? It won't. Their lawyer was right. This makes them look bad. And tomorrow, when we walk into that courtroom, the judge will see Stephanie Compton in a very different light." The custody hearing began the next morning in a packed courtroom. Judge Rebecca Morrow, known for her no-nonsense approach to family law, reviewed the case files with a stern expression. Stephanie sat with Michelle Schroeder, looking polished and composed despite the media circus surrounding her family. Marcos sat with Johnny and Robert, who'd been allowed to attend as a support person. Johnny opened with a straightforward presentation of facts: Stephanie's abandonment of Sophie while the child was ill, the drained joint account, the canceled insurance, and the eviction that left them homeless. Medical records documented Sophie's condition. Photographs showed the van they'd been living in. Michelle countered with character witnesses who testified to Stephanie's dedication as a mother during the marriage. She produced financial records showing Marcos's sporadic income and argued that Stephanie's actions were necessary to protect her daughter's future. But when Johnny cross-examined Stephanie, cracks appeared. "Mrs. Archer, when you left your daughter with her father on November 10th, was she showing symptoms of illness?" "She had a slight cough." "A slight cough?" "Medical records indicate she had a fever of 102 and difficulty breathing." "Did you take her to a doctor before leaving her with your husband?" I thought it was just a cold." But you didn't take her to a doctor? No. And yet you claim my client is the unfit parent? Michelle objected, but the damage was done. Judge Morrow's expression had shifted from neutral to skeptical. Johnny continued, Mrs. Archer, did you drain your joint account with Mr. Archer on November 7th? I transferred my money to a separate account. Your money? The account was joint. You withdrew $23,000, the entirety of the account balance, without informing your husband. Did you consider that he might need those funds for expenses? For your daughter's medical care? I assumed he'd figure something out. You assumed he'd figure out how to pay for medical care with no money, no insurance, and no home. Objection, Michelle said sharply. Argumentative. Sustained, the judge said. But I'd like to hear the answer. Stephanie faltered. I was upset. We were getting divorced. I didn't think about. You didn't think about your daughter's welfare? That's not what I meant. Johnny paused, letting the moment hang. No further questions. Robert watched Stephanie compose herself, her lawyer whispering urgently. The confident woman who'd met with them days ago was gone, replaced by someone who looked increasingly trapped. Then it was time for Marcos to testify. Johnny guided him through the chronology, the marriage, the growing control from Stephanie's family, the isolation, and finally the eviction and abandonment. Mr. Archer, why didn't you fight the eviction? I didn't know I could. Stephanie had signed the lease. I thought I had no rights. And the joint account. I trusted her. She handled our finances. I didn't check the balance regularly. Marcos's voice strengthened. I know that was naive. I know I should have been more involved. But I was trying to save our marriage. I was trying to be the husband she wanted me to be. What happened when Stephanie brought Sophie to you on November 10th? Sophie was burning up with fever. She could barely breathe. I took her to the emergency room immediately. They gave me antibiotic samples and said to come back if she got worse. I stayed in the hospital parking lot because I was terrified she'd stop breathing in the night. Why didn't you contact your father earlier? Marcos looked at Robert. Because I was ashamed. I'd failed my daughter. I'd failed my family. But when Sophie got really sick and I had nowhere else to go, I didn't have a choice. And my dad, he saved us. Michelle's cross-examination tried to paint Marcos as irresponsible and financially unstable, but his answers were simple and honest. Yes, his income was irregular. Yes, he'd made mistakes. But he'd never abandoned his daughter. He'd never put her at risk. When the testimonies concluded, Judge Morrow called a brief recess. Robert and Marcos stepped into the hallway. You did well, Robert said. I just told the truth. Sometimes that's enough. When court resumed, Judge Morrow delivered her ruling. I've reviewed all the evidence and testimony in this case. While both parents clearly love their child, the actions taken by Mrs. Archer, specifically abandoning a sick child, draining the joint account, and canceling health insurance during a divorce, demonstrate extremely poor judgment. Mr. Archer, while financially unstable at the time, showed appropriate concern for his daughter's welfare and sought help when needed. Given that Mr. Archer now resides in a stable home environment provided by his father, I'm granting temporary primary custody to Mr. Archer with supervised visitation for Mrs. Archer. We'll revisit permanent custody in 3 months. Stephanie gasped. Michelle immediately moved for reconsideration, but the judge was firm. My decision stands. Court is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, Marcos hugged Robert, tears streaming down his face. We won. We actually won. You won, Robert corrected. You fought for your daughter and won. Across the plaza, the Compton family gathered in a tight, angry cluster. Chad's face was thunderous. Donna looked devastated. And Stephanie sobbed while Nate tried to comfort her. Robert watched them with cold satisfaction. This was just the beginning. That evening, Lewis called with news about the warehouse investigation. We've got everything documented. But there's more. I've been tracking Nate's movements, and he met with someone suspicious last night, a guy named Caesar Edwards. He's connected to organized crime, specifically cargo theft rings. Robert's instincts fired. Compton Holdings uses freight companies for their construction supplies. Are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that the insurance fraud might be bigger than we thought. What if they're not just claiming false thefts? What if they're actually facilitating real thefts, getting insurance payouts, and then buying back their own materials through intermediaries at a fraction of the cost? That would involve multiple felonies: insurance fraud, organized theft, money laundering. Exactly. And if we can prove Nate's connection to Edwards, We've got them on all of it. Robert thought quickly. Can you get evidence of the connection? I can try, but we're moving into dangerous territory. These aren't just wealthy fraudsters. If they're working with organized crime, they're connected to dangerous people. I didn't start this fight, Lewis, but I'm going to finish it. Get the evidence. The next day, Art Schaefer called with his final report on Compton Holdings' finances. Robert, they're in serious trouble. The loans I mentioned? They're coming due in the next 60 days. The lenders are private equity firms with reputations for brutal collections. If Compton Holdings can't pay, they'll lose everything. Their properties, their company, their assets. How much do they owe? $15 million. And with the elder abuse investigation tanking their reputation, they're hemorrhaging business. Tenants are breaking leases, new deals are falling through. They're in a death spiral. What would happen if their insurance policies suddenly got canceled? Art was quiet for a moment. That would accelerate the collapse. Without insurance, they can't get new financing or maintain existing contracts. Why do you ask? Just thinking ahead. Thanks, Art. Robert made one more call, this one to an old friend at a major insurance company. 20 minutes later, he hung up with a smile. Compton Holdings policies would be under review within 48 hours. Anonymous tips about potential fraud had reached the right people. The insurance company would conduct its own investigation, and during that time, all policies would be suspended. The Comptons were running out of time and options, and Robert was about to close the final trap. 3 days later, the dominoes began falling rapidly. First, the district attorney announced a formal investigation into the elder abuse allegations. 2 families filed civil suits against Donna Compton's care management company. Adult Protective Services revoked the company's license pending review. Second, Compton Holdings Insurance Company suspended their policies and launched a fraud investigation based on irregularities in multiple theft claims. Third, the Portland Tribune ran a follow-up story connecting Nate Compton to known associates of cargo theft rings, complete with photographs of him meeting with Caesar Edwards. Chad Compton called an emergency board meeting at Compton Holdings. The conference room was tense, several board members notably absent. This is a coordinated attack, Chad insisted. Robert Archer is behind all of it. The newspaper stories, the investigations, everything. Ed Baker, their attorney, looked exhausted. Even if that's true, the evidence is real. The DA has documentation, the insurance company has their own investigators, and the photograph of Nate with Edwards is damning. Nate spoke up, his voice defensive. I met with him once about a construction project. That's all. I didn't know he was connected to. It doesn't matter what you knew, Ed interrupted. It matters what it looks like. And it looks like Compton Holdings is involved in organized crime. Donna's hands shook as she poured water. This can't be happening. Our family has been in Portland for generations. Your family's reputation is destroyed, one of the board members said bluntly. I'm resigning, effective immediately. I can't be associated with this company anymore. 2 others followed suit. Chad slammed his fist on the table. We can fight this. We have resources, lawyers. You have $15 million in debt coming due and no way to pay it, Ed said flatly. Your insurance is suspended, your reputation is ruined, and criminal investigations are underway. Chad, it's over. The best thing you can do now is cooperate with investigators and try to avoid prison. The room fell silent. Stephanie, who'd been quiet throughout, finally spoke. This is about Sophie, isn't it? Archer's doing this because we tried to take her away. He's doing this because you gave him the ammunition, Ed replied. Every crime, every fraud, every unethical decision your family made over the years, he just exposed it. You did this to yourselves. That night, Robert received a call from Johnny Watson. Stephanie's lawyer contacted me. She wants to surrender full custody to Marcos immediately. No visitation fight, no appeals. She just wants out. Robert felt a grim satisfaction. What changed her mind? Probably the realization that her family's about to be indicted on multiple felonies. She can't fight a custody battle from prison. Plus, I think she genuinely didn't understand how bad things were until now. Get it in writing. I want this locked down before she changes her mind. Within 24 hours, the custody agreement was signed. Sophie was legally Marcos's daughter, with Stephanie relinquishing all parental rights voluntarily. When Marcos told Sophie that she'd be staying with him and Gramps forever, the little girl threw her arms around his neck. Forever and ever, sunshine. Robert watched from the doorway, feeling the first true peace he'd had in weeks. His family was safe. His granddaughter was home. But the Comptons' reckoning wasn't finished yet. The final collapse came swiftly. Federal investigators, alerted by the insurance fraud case, began examining Compton Holdings' financial records. They discovered a web of illegal activities: the insurance fraud scheme, kickbacks from contractors, money laundering through shell companies, and connections to organized crime. Chad and Nate were arrested and charged with multiple felonies. Donna faced charges related to the elder abuse scheme. Stephanie, who'd been peripherally involved in the family business, was offered immunity in exchange for testimony. The Compton estate was seized as proceeds of criminal activity. Their properties went into receivership. The company that had dominated Portland real estate for decades was dissolved, its assets sold to pay debts and restitution to victims. Martha Snyder won a journalism award for her investigative series. The families of the elderly victims received settlements from the company's remaining assets. And Adult Protective Services implemented new oversight regulations for care management companies. Robert stood in the courtroom when Chad and Nate were sentenced. Chad received 8 years for fraud and racketeering. Nate got 12 for his direct involvement with organized crime. Donna, who'd cooperated with investigators, received 5 years probation and was banned from any role in elder care. As they were led away, Chad looked across the courtroom and met Robert's eyes. The recognition there was clear. He understood now who had orchestrated his downfall. Robert held his gaze steadily, no triumph in his expression, just cold certainty that justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, Marcos waited with Sophie. "Is it over?" Marcos asked. "It's over," Robert confirmed. "I still can't believe everything that happened. How they just collapsed. They built their empire on exploitation and fraud. Empires like that always fall eventually. I just helped it happen a little faster." Robert looked at his son. "What matters now is moving forward. You have Sophie. You have your art. What are you going to do with it?" Marcos was quiet for a moment. "I want to start painting again. Real painting, not just commercial work. Sophie's been asking me to teach her. Then teach her. Show her that creating something beautiful is its own reward. That integrity matters more than money or status. You showed me that too, Dad. I'm sorry it took me so long to remember." Robert pulled his son into a hug. "You never forgot. You just needed reminding." 6 months later, Marcos held his first gallery opening in 10 years. The paintings reflected his journey, the darkness of loss and betrayal, the light of redemption and family. Sophie's small painting of sunflowers hung in a place of honor, labeled Artist, Sophie Archer, age 6. The gallery was packed with friends, art collectors, and media. Robert stood in the back, watching his son bask in well-earned recognition. Louis Lehman approached with a beer. "Quite a turnout. Marcos is talented. People are finally seeing it. You know the Comptons appealed their sentences?" "I heard. They'll lose." "You sound certain." "I am. The evidence was overwhelming, and they have no leverage left. They're done." Robert took a sip of his drink. "How's your sister?" "Thriving. She asks about you sometimes. Says you saved her life." "I just helped her start over." "She saved herself. Same thing you did for Marcos." Robert shook his head. "Marcos saved himself. And Sophie, he just needed the opportunity to do it." As the evening wore on, Sophie tugged on Robert's hand. "Gramps, did you see my painting?" "I did. It's beautiful. Daddy says I'm going to be a great artist someday." "I believe him. Will you help me paint more sunflowers tomorrow?" Robert crouched down to her level. This little girl who'd been so sick and scared months ago, now healthy and happy and full of dreams. "I'd love to." Later, as the gallery emptied and Marcos dealt with collectors interested in his work, Robert stepped outside into the cool Portland evening. His phone buzzed with an email, a quarterly report from Archer Freight Solutions. The company was thriving, expanding into new markets. But for the first time in 30 years, Robert wasn't thinking about business. He was thinking about his son, finding his voice again through art. He was thinking about his granddaughter, learning that the world could be both beautiful and just. He was thinking about the Comptons, facing the consequences they'd evaded for so long. Justice, Robert had learned, wasn't always swift. But when it came, it was absolute. The door opened behind him. Marcos stepped out, his face flushed with success. "Dad, there's someone inside who wants to commission a mural for their building. A big one. 6 figures." Robert smiled. That's wonderful. I couldn't have done this without you. Without everything you did. You would have found your way back eventually. Maybe. But you made sure Sophie and I were safe while I did. You gave us a second chance. Robert put his arm around his son's shoulders. That's what family does. We protect each other. We fight for each other. And when someone threatens what we love, we make sure they understand the cost of that mistake. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the Portland skyline glitter in the distance. What do we do now? Marcos asked. Now? We go home. Tomorrow, you start planning that mural. Next week, Sophie starts our classes. And the week after that, we take a family vacation, somewhere with a beach and sunshine. That sounds perfect. They walked back inside together, father and son, united by battle and bound by love. The Comptons were gone, their empire reduced to rubble and prison sentences. The victims they'd exploited had received justice. And the Archer family, Robert, Marcos, and little Sophie, had survived, stronger than before. Robert Archer had spent his life moving freight, navigating complex logistics, and solving impossible problems. But his greatest success had nothing to do with business. It was standing here, watching his son thrive and his granddaughter laugh, knowing he'd protected what mattered most. Everything else was just details. And Robert Archer had always been very, very good with details. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.